Imagine visiting a community where one of the most respected traditions is drinking fresh cow blood. Not as a dare, not as a ritual of shock, but as a normal part of life, nutrition, and identity. For many outsiders, this practice sounds unbelievable. But for one famous African tribe, it has been part of their culture for centuries. And the truth behind it is far more fascinating than most people realize. Today, we're exploring the untold story of the Maasai people, a proud community whose traditions continue to captivate the world.
The Maasai people are a semi-nomadic community living across the vast savannas of Kenya and Tanzania. Known for their bright red clothing, intricate beadwork, and tall warrior traditions, the Maasai have become one of the most recognizable cultures in Africa. But behind their striking appearance lies a way of life that revolves around one animal above all else: cattle. To the Maasai, cows are not just livestock. They are food, wealth, tradition, and identity. And understanding their relationship with cattle is the key to understanding why cow blood became part of their culture. For centuries, the Maasai have lived as pastoralists, meaning their survival depends on raising livestock rather than farming crops. Across the dry plains of East Africa, agriculture can be difficult. Rainfall is unpredictable, and fertile soil is limited. But cattle thrive in these environments. So, over generations, the Maasai developed a culture where cattle became the center of everything. A family's wealth is measured not in money, but in how many cows they own. Cows provide milk, hides for clothing, and materials for building homes. But there is another resource cattle provide that many people around the world never consider: blood. In Maasai culture, blood is seen as a powerful source of nutrition, and remarkably, the tribe developed a method of collecting it without killing the animal. Using a small arrow or sharp tool, a Maasai herder carefully punctures the jugular vein of a cow. A container is placed underneath to collect the blood. Once enough blood is taken, the wound is sealed with natural materials such as clay or dung. Within minutes, the bleeding stops, and the cow calmly returns to the herd. The animal survives, and the community receives valuable nutrients. Often, the blood is mixed with milk to create a thick, protein-rich drink. For the Maasai, this drink provides essential nutrients like iron and protein, especially during times when food may be scarce. But this practice is not something done casually every day. Traditionally, drinking cow blood happens during special circumstances. For example, young warriors may drink it after undergoing difficult training. Women who have recently given birth may drink it to regain strength. And during certain ceremonies, it symbolizes vitality and resilience. In this way, the practice becomes more than just nutrition. It becomes tradition, a tradition that has survived for centuries in some of Africa's most challenging environments.
But here's the part that surprises most outsiders. Despite relying so heavily on their cattle, the Maasai rarely kill them. Instead of slaughtering animals regularly for meat, they developed a system that allows them to benefit from their livestock while keeping them alive. Which means their relationship with cattle is not just about survival, it's about balance. And that balance has helped sustain Maasai communities for generations. The culture of the Maasai is filled with fascinating traditions beyond the practice of drinking cow blood. For example, Maasai warriors are famous for a unique ceremonial dance that involves incredible vertical jumping. During celebrations and rites of passage, young men compete to see who can jump the highest while maintaining perfect posture. The higher the jump, the stronger and more impressive the warrior appears. Another remarkable aspect of Maasai culture is their clothing. Their bright red garments, known as shuka, are not just for decoration. The color red is believed to symbolize bravery and strength, and it also helps them stand out in the vast savanna landscapes. Even their jewelry tells a story. Maasai beadwork is carefully designed using different colors and patterns that represent stages of life, social status, and family connections. White beads may symbolize purity and milk. Blue can represent the sky and rain. Red stands for courage and unity. Perhaps even more surprising is how the Maasai have maintained many of their traditions despite the rapid modernization happening across Africa. While many members of the community now attend schools, work in cities, or participate in tourism, countless Maasai families still maintain aspects of their ancestral lifestyle. Their ability to adapt while preserving cultural identity is one of the reasons their traditions continue to captivate the world. From an outside perspective, the idea of drinking cow blood may seem shocking or difficult to understand. But when viewed through the lens of Maasai culture, it tells a very different story. It represents a community that learned to live in harmony with its environment. Instead of exploiting their animals, the Maasai developed sustainable practices that allow both humans and livestock to thrive. Their traditions remind us that cultures around the world evolve in response to the environments people live in. What may seem unusual from one perspective may actually be a brilliant solution from another. And in the case of the Maasai, their way of life has helped them survive in some of East Africa's harshest landscapes for generations. The story of the Maasai people is a powerful reminder that culture cannot always be understood at first glance. Behind every tradition lies history, survival, and centuries of wisdom passed from one generation to the next. What many people see as strange is actually a reflection of resilience, adaptation, and deep respect for nature. And in a rapidly modernizing world, the Maasai stand as a symbol of how ancient traditions can continue to thrive while still adapting to the future. Their story is not just about drinking cow blood. It's about identity, it's about survival, and it's about a culture that continues to inspire curiosity around the world. If you enjoyed discovering this fascinating story, make sure to subscribe to Inside Africa Chronicles for more untold stories from across Africa. From hidden tribes and ancient empires to mysterious traditions and forgotten histories, this channel explores the cultures that make Africa one of the most diverse and captivating continents on Earth. Because Africa has thousands of stories the world rarely hears, and we're just getting started.